Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're able to hear me. Hello?
We can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the fourth conversation on gender and climate justice series. As usual, today's dialogue is hosted by the Friedrich Ebert, a nonprofit German foundation, and the Inclusive Climate Change Adaptation for Sustainable Africa. My name is Dr. Mary Nyasimi, and I'm the Executive Director at ICASA, and I actually welcome you to participate actively in this conversation. For today's conversation, we only have about 45 minutes, and please note that the conversations are being recorded, as well as streaming on ICASA's YouTube channel. We do encourage you to actively tweet this conversation using the hashtag Gender and Climate Justice. In case you have a question, when our presenter is going through her presentation, a question or a comment, please type it on the chat box and they'll be answered after the guest speaker, who is Ms. Sally Owoda, has finished speaking. As I said, our speaker today is Sally Owoda, who is a gender and social development specialist with experience working in the NGO development sector on policy formulation, advocacy, gender mainstreaming in programs and projects. She's actually developing a career path which capitalizes on her passion for social justice initiatives. Currently, she's the chairperson at the African Center for People, Institutions, and Society. Welcome, Sally.
Thank you, Mary. Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you're joining us from. I'm Salome Owoda, as has been mentioned to you. Today, I'll take you through a presentation on tackling the double injustice of gender inequality and climate change. It will be a short presentation based on the basic gender terms. And then I'll do an introduction, and then I go into deep issues and then present the way forward, what can be done. So it's important that we start with understanding what we mean by gender, which is a socially and culturally constructed differences between men and women. And it's important to note that this is different from sex, which is biological setup of men and women. Then we have gender equality, because these are the terms that we'll be using a lot in this presentation. It means that men and women are able to enjoy their rights and opportunities without that being tagged onto whether they are born male or female. And then we have gender inequality, which is basically the presence of discrimination based on the sex. It's important to note that when we are talking about gender equality and gender inequality, we are not trying to make men and women to be same. We are just saying that their rights and their opportunities should not be tagged to the fact that they are men or women. They should not be discriminated because one is a man or one is a woman, or whichever sex orientation they align with. When we talk about gender groups, we're talking about different categories of men and women based on their vulnerability factor, e.g. Age, disability, class, and sexuality. We need to note that men and women, when we talk about men or we talk about women, we're not talking about homogeneous groups, but there are other factors that determine how men and women relate and how men and women access and control resources. And this is where we have the gender group. So we'll talk about whether they're children, whether they're elderly, they're youth, they're people with disability and all that. Then when we talk about gender injustice, we'll be talking about the fact that those in the society who are experiencing inequalities in society, maybe by systematic laws or customs, are usually the ones who are poor because they're not able to access and control resources. And it's unfortunate that this same group are the people who are impacted by climate change in a very extreme ways. And because they're already poor and they are not able to control and access resources, they're not able to easily get out of those problems that are impacted on them by climate change. So that is basically what you're talking about when you talk about injustice, the double injustice. Then we talk about gender relations. Then this is what we talk about, the dimensions of which influences the roles and responsibilities of men and women in the society. And this comes with the power relations. It comes with who makes decisions on access and control of resources. Then from the terms, we'll go down to now introduction on why we need to talk about the double injustice of in the society, the gender inequalities and its relationship to the climate change. We are doing this because climate change impacts on men and women differently. With the disadvantaged gender groups, as we had talked about the gender groups, we have the disadvantaged ones. They're usually more impacted. They bear the burden of climate change impacts. And this group usually lack the resources. So that because they don't have the resources, they're not able to adapt quickly and get out of the problems that they're faced because of climate change problems. And they don't have voices because they're not represented in decision-making places. So they're not able even to communicate to the people who are formulating policies on what they need, what needs to be done to them, and even sometimes their problems. So we need to note that because of the gender, the social constructions, we have social norms, and these social norms will impact negatively on both men and women, as we had talked about the different gender groups. They impact on women differently, they impact on men differently, depending on which group of men you're talking about. For example, we will talk about how climate change can impact negatively on men. We know that the society expects the men to be heroes. They're expected to be risk takers. So in a situation where we have a disaster, the men tend to be more negatively impacted because they try so much to prove to the whole world that they are able to take care of everyone in the society. They don't fear anything, and in the process, they find themselves in a dangerous situation. So as we talk about climate change actions, and as we talk about inclusivity or the inequalities that it comes with, we should focus on ensuring that we do not just talk about the economic impact that it comes with, and the fact that when you include the men and women of different categories and take care of their specific needs and concerns, then our projects and programs are likely to be more effective. But the first thing that we should talk about why we need to include all the categories is because that is what humanity demands. That is what social justice is about. So we should put the humanity ahead of the economic advantages that comes with including all these other groups. And then it's important to understand the channels through which different groups experience climate change. First of all, we'll talk about the food security and agriculture. In producing food and in our communities, it's usually based on gender roles, specific gender roles. You'll find that women do a specific role. Like when you're talking about agriculture, you'll find that the women will do the weeding, but they will not decide which crop goes to which farm, and they will not. You'll rarely find them in the market selling the produce and how deciding on how the profit is being utilized. So when you're talking about food security, we have to consider the different roles played by different gender groups and how we can involve them in ensuring that we have food security. And these roles, as we talk about them, they can impact both men and women differently. And it's important to note that even men, sometimes the gender roles that we have in food production impact them negatively. For example, we talk about the seclusion that is practiced in most of the Muslim communities, for example, the Hausa community. At first, that seclusion was being practiced by the wealthy societies, but because of the conservative Islam, it is now being practiced by nearly everyone. So as they do that, it means that the women are not able to go to the farm and help with the production, and that put all the pressure on food production on the men in the society. So even as we talk about food security, we need to talk about the fact that building resilience of women and men in food security, those who are under the vulnerable gender groups, is not easy because they don't have access and control of resources. They don't have control of land. Most of the time, you'll find that according to records, it's 10 to 20% of those who have title deeds who are women. And when you talk about the agricultural extension workers, only 5% of them are women. So the building their resilience is not so easy because they lack the major resources that they need for food production, like land. They don't have credit. They don't have, sometimes they don't have right information on when to sow and which crops to go for and how to diversify. Climate change in food production leads to lower nutritional levels in crops, and reduced production. As we experience reduced production, we experience higher food prices, and because of the fact that these communities or these individuals and groups are already disadvantaged and poor, they're not able to afford the higher prices of food. So they'll decide to just stick to the staple food that is often not so nutritious as the proteins that we have. The other channel through which these groups experience climate change differently is the economic empowerment bit of it. It is noted that just half of women worldwide are in employment or have jobs, compared to 4/5 of the men. So this automatically means that they lack resources to adapt to wherever there is a climate disaster. They're the ones who are not able to quickly move to safer places. They're the ones who are not able to leave their homes and go and build elsewhere, or even build better structures, so that when the floods come or it's too hot, they're able to adapt to the situation. So, and also apart from that, the thermal condition always affect our working, both mentally and physically. The worst affected people are those ones who work outdoors. Majority of those who work outdoors are belonging to the disadvantaged gender group, because they're the ones who are earning lower compared to the others. So this already means that the thermal condition disadvantageously or disproportionately affect the poor or the disadvantaged gender groups. The other channel is reproductive health, through reproductive health rights. As we experience drought, sometimes families opt to force their girls into early marriage so that they can get resources out of that, or they drop out of school because now there's drought, there's no food, all the money goes to food and not into education. So with that, the women end up with starting the mothering job so early, and that means the young and not literate enough, and end up with high birth rates and poor reproductive service. They access poor reproductive services. So this means they are not resilient enough. They will not be resilient enough to the climate change impacts, because they'll be having too many children, and in the society, the caring job is usually to the women. So they'll be having too many children to take care of. So even in the time when there's drought, when there's a flood and people need to to leave their homes to safer places, they're not able to quickly move out because they have kids that they have to move with, or even their health status is not so good because maybe they've experienced, because of the poor reproductive services, they've experienced birth-related problems or health issues so many times that they remain with sometimes even lifetime health problems. And it's important that as we talk about reproductive health rights and climate change, we do not confuse this with the population control, which just talks about the fact that if we are many in this earth, or the planet is not able to take care of us, we're not able to get food. But we need to talk first about the resilience that women having many children and starting to give birth early are not able to achieve with the climate change problems and disasters, and allow the women to decide on their own on reproductive decisions, like whether they want to have kids and when. Because sincerely speaking, we find that even somebody who is wealthier and have just one child, this child can have a higher carbon footprint than this poor vulnerable person down here who has whose kids have like three kids or 4 kids. So as we talk about the relationship between reproductive health and climate change, we should not just concern ourselves with the population control, but how resilient these women can be when they don't have kids so early on, or they don't have so many kids, when they don't have so many kids. And so that means that we will talk about letting them have their choice, letting them know what is wrong, what is right, and letting them decide what is best for them. The other channel is climate change, disaster, and emergency. As we have talked about this so many times in this presentation, the fact that climate shock, it exacerbates the vulnerability of the disadvantaged already. So you find that the households that are poor or are from headed by the people who belong to the vulnerable group, like people living with disability, and sometimes even women or even the youth, they're not able to cope very fast with the climate change related disasters. And you'll find that maybe the way their houses are built, they're not built in a way that is able to survive when there's flood, for example. Sometimes they're just weakly built with thin walls instead of having well-constructed homes. And because of that, even their needs will be different when there's a disaster, climate-related disaster, because you'll find that someone has lost everything, the house is down, like completely down, but the ones that are well-built might even survive the floods. And also after the floods and the needs that they have, you'll find that the ones who are headed by the people from disadvantaged gender group are not able to adapt very fast and move forward from the disaster. So all that means that even when you're talking about their policies on disaster, you need to take care of the fact that their needs are different, their adopting capacity is totally different. And it's when it comes to disaster, we talk about people who are not able to move. They stay in places that are not safe. They're prone to disaster, and you wonder what is wrong with these people. It's sometimes because those places are usually more affordable, and because they already don't have resources, they already make the higher group, the higher population of the poor, they opt to just go for those areas that they know very well. This place gets flooded, but this is the place where maybe I'll pay a rent of Kenya shillings 3,000 instead of going to a safer place where I'll need to pay a rent of Kenya shillings 10,000, or even buy a land for my family. So those are some of the reasons that make them to go to places that are prone to disaster. And another reason is because sometimes they decide to stay in those places because after the floods, for example, we know that the coastal deltas become more fertile. So they decided to take advantage of the benefit that come with the floods. And some of them, it's because they lack information, because we know that these are the same people who don't have enough education, and also they don't have access to technology and all those, the information that they need. And sometimes the mobility is also different from those who are in advantaged group. So they're not able to get information as quick as other people can. So when we're coming up with solution on this, we need to find a way and need to find channels for communicating with both the people who are advantaged, the gender groups that are advantaged in the society, and those that are disadvantaged or discriminated. And sometimes these groups tend to seek refugee when it's too late, because they're not there. Sometimes you see some of the communities that women are not allowed to mix with the men, so they'd rather stay. And by the time they are deciding to leave, when they realize things are, it's not what they think, it's a lot, it's not something that will go away immediately. It may be too late for them to even find help. And sometimes when we talk about the places where they go to, the places where we take these victims or survivors to, when there's floods, it's usually mixed. They stay with men and women at the same structures or same places, and sometimes women are not allowed to mix with these men, so they'd rather not go and stay and suffer. And sometimes it's because of the caregiving job, they have to move with the children, they have to move with the disabled, they have to ensure that the elderly are all safe before they leave their homes. And if you're talking about the people living with disability, they're not able to swim when there's flood, they're not able to run very fast, or even when we have fire outbreak or whatever it happens, they're not able to leave their homes and even do the stairs very fast. So those are some of the reasons that they're not able to move very fast when there's a problem. There's a case that we can talk about as we talk about the mobility and the gender differentiated needs, the inequality that comes with it. In Pakistan in 2014, when there was floods, there was a research that was done, and the survivors were interviewed, and the women said they were not able to get health services. The reason being that they're not allowed to get health services from men, because they're women, they should be treated by the women. And now there's a problem, and majority of the men have left the community. It's the women who have remained, but the doctors, majority of them are men. So even the doctors had to suffer, the male doctors had to suffer, and they decided to leave the community to other places where they could work. Then we talk about, these are some of the channels. There are so many other channels. I could not talk about all of them today. But also, as we move forward about the channels, the problems that we have, it's important to note that the actions that we take really determine the outcomes that we're going to have. Because you can have a gender neutral or gender blind actions, and these actions usually have different impacts. When you have a gender blind or gender neutral climate change action, then we will, it might end up having more harm than having the good that you are expecting. Because for example, when you talk about the land reforms, though not just about climate change, but the land reforms really impacted on the women in India differently, because they're not allowed, they're not owning the lands, they're not having the title deeds. And these are the lands that, because of the communal, when it was owned by the community, they were able to go collect firewood and do the gender cause that come with it. But now people have title deeds. You can't just go to their homes or their compound or their land to collect firewood and all that. And also sometimes of these adaptation initiatives, especially the ones that require that the local residents are moved to other places, they tend to disadvantage the already disadvantaged gender groups. Because, for example, you want to construct something and you're telling me to move from my house, yet these people are already mostly in informal settlements without title deeds. So sometimes even they don't get to be paid what they should be paid for moving out, because you'll start hearing stories of they're already encroaching, or even because they're not well represented in decision making. Sometimes even the people who are given who are resettled, who are given the money and resources that come with the resettlement are not them, but the other people who are already advantaged in the society. For example, when you talk about the floods, when there was flood in Bangladesh, and they decided to create the flood prevention embankments. And at the end of it all, the poor people, the ones who are in gender disadvantaged group, the women in the informal settlements, ended up being displaced, being homeless, because the resettlement didn't take care of their needs. They were already in an informal settlement without title deeds. And then also sometimes the intended beneficiaries might even end up being negatively impacted. So even as you think about gender, you are neutral, you know that your beneficiaries, but ensure that you're not just neutral, you are transformative, because these adaptive initiatives, for example, the one that requires that you build a climate resilient infrastructure. Sometimes you need to move the people, the place where they were living is now becoming more lucrative. And then maybe the rents will go up, or the land rates will go up, and they're not able to even afford it anymore. So you end up even making their life more miserable, because maybe they were just okay in their informal settlement, but now you've made the informal settlement a middle class area, or for the rich, and now they can't afford it anymore. You move them to the street, they become homeless. So you may end up worsening their situation. This has, for example, happened in Copenhagen when they decided to create or build climate resilient infrastructures, but then it became too expensive for the disadvantaged gender, and they had to move out of it. So as we talk about making our actions to be gender sensitive, gender responsive, we also have to know that doing this comes with risk. There's some risks that come with it. For example, you may end up focusing on the disadvantages, or you may end up focusing on the disadvantages on the disadvantaged group as victims and not holistically. So it means you don't include them as agents of change, but you're just thinking about them. Yes, this is what they can be needing. This is what they can be needing. And sometimes that is not even what they need. Or maybe they also have some information that they can share. They have some unique knowledge. So as we talk about engendering the climate change actions, we also need to have the possible risks that come with it at the back of our minds and deal with them early enough. But also another possible risk is that we may end up placing all the responsibility on the vulnerable, because maybe you've just come up with a project that targets what can PWDs do in climate change, how can we engage the women, and then you end up putting all the responsibility on climate change on them, instead of focusing or rather making those in power to be accountable. So sometimes we need to balance all that as we come up with the projects, as we implement them. And also sometimes another risk is entrenching the existing stereotypes and perpetuating status quo, because sometimes you come up with the projects that you just implement because you know where the society placed the women or where the society placed the PWDs. So you don't come up with systematic changes, but you include them and work with them within where they already are. So you risk entrenching the stereotypes, you risk perpetuating the status quo in the process. So we need to be alive to all this. And now, how can we achieve a gender just action? What can we do? There are 3 steps that we have to think about every time we're coming with a project, every time we're coming with initiative, every time we are thinking of how to reduce the impact of climate change in our society. We have to think of the needs and priorities of the different gender groups. This is basically the relationship, the gender relations. What do women do? What do men do at what time? What do they have access to? And what do they have control to? The access and control to the resources. Who does what? And how does this relate with climate change? And then we also need to talk about the beliefs and perception. What are the beliefs in this society? In different societies, the beliefs are always different. Even the roles are different depending on the society. So what are the beliefs? What do people believe men are supposed to do, women are supposed to do, or how do they engage with climate change? You'll find that maybe women are it's believed that if a woman plants a tree, for example, if a woman plants a tree, that tree might not even grow because it's a woman, or if they water them at what point of the month, all those beliefs that maybe no one talks about them in a formal setup, but they're there and the woman just knows, I'm not supposed to do this. The PWD knows that maybe if I go and harvest at which time, then there's a problem. Or if you want to diversify, which crops do they believe belong to the men and which ones belong to the women, and how do you work, how do you deal with the perception? And then the third thing is the systems. We need to deal with the system, the systematic inequalities. So which policies do we have? Which laws do we have? How can we ensure that these policies and laws are engendered, the policies and laws that are climate change oriented? How do we ensure that they are engendered? What are the gaps in our policies and laws, and even the customs? Because some of these societies, they have rules that are discussed in formal setups. When the community sits down, it's not just a perception, but it is a rule in the society, the customs. How do we deal with them? We need to, for us to achieve gender just climate actions, we need to take care of and think of, discuss, and find a way forward on those 3 areas. And now the solutions that we can come up with on the double injustice. These are some of the solutions. They're not the only solution. So the number 1 solution is full involvement in decision making, so that we ensure that the needs and interests are taken care of and we exploit the knowledge. So this talks about, we need to think about the inclusive participatory processes, so that men and women, youth and the elderly, everyone in the society, the PWDs, are involved in every step that we make in climate change initiatives, to ensure that their needs are taken care of, their interests are taken care of, the unique knowledge they have are also exploited. Then the second solution is having gendered climate support. The support that we have for the enablers for climate change should be gendered. For example, the climate finance, technological transfer, the capacity building. How do we ensure that capacity building is engendered? How do we implement capacity building in a way that both men and women are involved, and the different categories of men and women are involved in conducting the capacity building, and also as participants? And how do you ensure that technology is not just the technological transfer reaches them? And how do we ensure that climate finance targets, because it's very important that we have targeted projects. It targets the needs, the interests of the men and women and different groups, and also involve them in the process as agents of change. So this is, for example, the Green Climate Fund is implementing this in a way when they ask for gender action plan in the proposals, and ensuring that we have gender activities, gender-based activities, and all that. So we need to talk more about it. We need to implement more about this. And the other thing is, when you talk about the environmental taxation, these can really have negative impact on the disadvantaged gender, because they're already the majority of the poor. So as we come up with the taxation, the environmental taxation, we should ensure that we introduce subsidies and grants, the disadvantaged, to help them so that even if the cost of fuel of transport goes up because the fuel is more expensive, then they get the grants and subsidies in other ways, so to ensure that they don't end up being disadvantaged further. And even as you come up with clean energy, yes, we need clean energy. We need to go the green economy way. But how do we ensure that we don't exacerbate the inequalities in our society as we do this? Come with the subsidies for the different gender groups to ensure that they also move with us to the clean energy era. And then the last one in my presentation is to ensure that we close the digital divide. The new technology is very important to us today. It has helped, it is helping so many people to make a living for themselves. It benefits them in a great way, but mostly it's the wealthiest segments that are able to adjust to new technology and exploit it. And you know that when we're talking about mitigation and we're talking about mitigation technology, most of the time we will not have the vulnerable or the disadvantaged gender groups in our initiatives or in the processes, or giving even information on how to implement this technology, because even the technology is not just implemented in seclusion. We need to implement them in the society. So in our societies, they may also have some indigenous information that can help in the implementation or formulation of this mitigation technology. So those are some of the solutions that I can talk about in this presentation. But even as we talk about all this, as we talk about the problems we have, the different needs, the different groups, the climate change impact, we need to always remember that social change, especially the gender norms, they don't come in an overnight thing. It's not something that you'll wake up tomorrow and things are perfect. You can't wake up tomorrow and all the climate change problems are gone. It is a process that it takes time. It takes sometimes even years, sometimes it takes a lot of time. So as we talk about the double injustice, the inequality, the different impact of climate change on different categories, we also need to consider the fact that there's something that is happening. We need to talk about, to consider the fact that what we have today might not be what we had many years ago. There's a difference, there's a change. So as we talk about that, we are hopeful that things will get better for us and for the whole community, the whole society, everyone, because climate change impacts everyone, and we'll be able to achieve our goals in climate change. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Salome, for such a wonderful presentation. Indeed, with your presentation today, we've learned some of the environmental solutions, not only the problems that women or youth or whoever face out there, but some of the solutions that actually can be put in place. For instance, full involvement in decision-making, gendered climate support, environmental taxation. In fact, somebody here has asked about environmental taxation, and closing the digital divide. Indeed, as we move forward into the future, digital technologies are going to be crucial in helping us adapt to the changing climate. We now enter our session of discussions and dialogues and questions and comments. So if you do have a comment or you want to speak, please press the button for raising up your hand and we'll be able to see you. And to begin with, we already have two questions. One was from Vitalis Juma, who is asking about, what was the question? It's on the chat actually, about what causes the gender gap pay, essentially. And then the second one is from, what's her name? Kezia Mahina, who is asking you to explain the meaning of environmental taxation and how that can enhance gender equality. Thank you. Salome, you can address those two and then we move on.
Thank you very much. To Vitalis Juma, the causes of gender gap. One of the main causes is education level. The women, as we know, they make the two-thirds of the illiterate population in the world. So there's that issue of education, but then also there's issue of salary negotiation. Maybe we need to teach our people, both men, women, and people in different categories, on how to negotiate for salary, maybe because they have some urgent needs. They're thinking of the children that they need to take care of, because sometimes we know that we have the single mothers, that the ones with their kids. So sometimes when you give them an offer, they will just accept it because that is what they just need, an income. And we know when you talk about the female-headed households, the female-headed households make 95% of the poor households. That is in research. So when you give them, sometimes when you tend to give them an offer, they'll just take it because they're maybe desperation or something. But also there's another thing about boys club, which happens because the men are, they meet, sometimes the men or the advantage, even some women can belong to the boys club because they have the meetings, the after meeting, where they'll even have discussions and they get to know what salary range can be between in which job. So sometimes because they miss in the boys club, they leave offices and rush home, or they don't even have a job, but they're just home taking care of the needy, the children, the elderly. They don't get to go to these after meetings to understand what the professional field is. So those are some of the reasons. But then there's also just discrimination, like just systematic discrimination, where a boss or the organization can just decide that it's a woman, they don't need much. So this is also happening, the systematic discrimination. It's unfortunate. On the environmental taxation, this is where you tax the services or products that are going to have negative impacts on our environment. You introduce tax on them. Like, for example, you can say that if you're going to use coal, then the tax will be higher. So the cost will be so high that you have to go the green energy way. Or you'll decide that because we want people to go the green energy way, so it's just balancing taxation to things that are going to make our climate change cause easier. You'll decide that because we want to go the green energy way, now we make maybe cooking gas to be cheaper, so that people decide that instead of going to collect firewood, instead of going to buy charcoal, let me go to and use gas.
Thank you for that response. Lydia Esther, you have your hand up. Lydia Esther, are you still with us?
Yes, I'm there. Yeah, may I just say thank you to Salome for the wonderful presentation. It's so wonderful, and I've learned a lot actually.
Thank you.
And based on the presentation, I just have a concern. And if you talk about the food security agriculture, can we see something under fisheries? In that where we talked about the fishmongering, where you find that during, especially at the moment, there's no fish. Fish is limited, and omena is also limited. Daga is limited at the lake. So you find that there's this practice of exchange of this daga or fish for sex. So can this also be part of it, or how can we bring about it under the gender and the climate? At the same time, under the issue of reproductive health and rights, if we can talk about under the global warming, is there any way how it relates with our menstrual issues that if can bring about something concerning the menstrual? Because during the global warming, the climate changes, and there's that dust that whatever we intake that during those points, especially the poor people, the water they take, it's a bit not that clean. So it increases the crampy part, especially during their menstrual period days. Yeah. So kindly, if you can clear something on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lydia. It's good that you brought up the issue of fisheries in food production. Yes, for sure, it's an important part of the food security and food production. And even as we talk, even for example, when you talk about the gender roles, the roles might be different with climate change, because sometimes the women who decide to because the men are the ones who do the fishing, and then the women are usually by the lakeside waiting for fish and daga to go and sell. So sometimes because now there's no fish, there's nothing to sell, then the women have to, or even the men, they have to now find another thing to do. Maybe you'll find that maybe someone who used to sell fish is now deciding to go and sell, open a small shop somewhere, or they have a kiosk, they get into business, cloth business. So that changes their roles. And in the process of the fact that now there are no fish, there's limited fish, then sometimes they have to, it's unfortunate that they have to provide much more than just the money to get the fish and go and sell. So sometimes these people take advantage of them and say that if for you to get this fish that you need, we are going to need, you're going to sleep with me, give sex in return, and you still give money. So yeah, those are some of the gender issues that come with the change in climate change. And when you talk about global warming and reproductive health, it's true, it goes beyond just giving birth and taking care of the kids, and it goes to the menstrual cycle, as you have explained very well. So yeah, we need to as we talk about global warming and the impacts that it has on our reproductive health system, that also has to be included, so that as we talk about the reduction of mitigation, the reduction on carbon footprints, because it impacts on us all, whether we understand climate change. So now, that is how to explain to everyone to get involved in climate change initiatives, because whether you understand climate change, whether you love climate change initiatives, but if you are a woman and we are experiencing global warming, then this is likely to also affect you in such a way. So yes, that can happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Sally. If you do have a question, please post it or raise your hand. There's been a comment left by Tabi Jode, Executive Director of 1 Billion Trees for Africa, and I think he has left the conversation. And he says, it is good to explore the different challenges affecting women, but we must be careful not to propagate practices that undermine our indigenous cultures that have helped us, our communities, to adapt to climate change for centuries. In his community, men and women farm together as well as gain and share gain as a family. When we talk gender roles, we need to emphasize family harmony as well. That is Tabi Jode. Eric Ngodi mentions that some words such as gender blind and ableism words. Hopefully we need to adjust so that we don't entrench the same. Ono Francis Oliko has mentioned that some salient points have been mentioned in Sally's presentation, particularly the cultures thing in Africa. And Vitalis has actually mentioned that he does also appreciate the social change, and gender norms do not happen overnight, but a process to which we are advancing. We have 5 minutes left. Is there anybody who would like to comment or ask a question? Okay, thank you. I think we've come to the end of our fourth dialogue on gender and climate justice, and we thank everyone who has come to join us today. This conversation is already uploaded on the ICASA YouTube channel, and I encourage everyone to continue the conversation there. The next gender and climate justice conversation will be held in a month, and I hope to see you in the next month. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sally.
Thank you. Bye-bye. How is everything?
Bye-bye.
Welcome. Thank you.